Well, it's not Count Dracula, isn't it? No, it's not Halloween. Welcome back to Health, Spice, and Life Show with Dr. Mario, and this show begins right now. You see, as it turns out, this whole celebration of having costumes and dressing up is not something that started right here just in the United States. It's not the Halloween celebration, but in the Latin American cultures, there is a particular tradition that is widespread and it's celebrated by millions of people, and it's actually quite significant. And we're talking about Dia de los Muertos, and we translate to that in English, Day of the Dead. You see, as it turns out, this has been such a huge, important celebration in this part of the world that in fact it has made it to pop culture. How? You probably have seen the famous movies of James Bond, Agent 007. Well, in the last movie that was made a few years ago, Inspector, we had one of the most unbelievable sets you could possibly imagine, starting up the movie Spectre. And what was it? It was right in the heart of Mexico City, in Ciudad Mexico, where they were celebrating Day of the Dead. But if you want to actually go to something more like, animation, we can think about the movie by Disney, Coco, where this little boy gets reunited with his family on the other side, the side of the dead people. So what is this whole thing about Day of the Dead? You see, as it turns out, over 3,000 years ago marks the beginning of this celebration, going back to the Mesoamerican, or nowadays called Central American cultures, the Aztecs. And as it actually evolved over time, and the Europeans came to this side of the world, the Spaniards and so on, basically it became a blend of celebrations. When you have the Aztec rituals that were being celebrated, and then you have the European religious influences, and then you have the Spanish culture as kind of like the envelope of all of that. There are three particular celebrations that are, the makeup of this celebration of Day of the Dead. The first one is Dia de los Angelitos, or Dia de los Inocentes, Day of the Innocent, or Day of the Children. And that's where children that have passed, that have died, they get celebrated by their families. That's on November 1st. And as we transition to midnight, going into November the 2nd, then we go into Day of the Dead. And this is really talking about the adults in the family that have passed. Each celebration is a little bit different. When it's about the children, they make something that is very special. There's different people that in families that celebrate it, which is a small altar that it's called in Spanish ofrenda. And the ofrenda pictures are placed, maybe some candies, maybe some foods, things or items that remind the family members of that particular member that passed away. When it comes to the adults, well, things get a little more naughty. Why is that? Because then there is food, but there's also alcohol and different drinks that are used in the Central American cultures, and particularly in Mexico, whether it's mezcal, whether it's tequila. That kind of part of the culture comes right through. Why? Because they're celebrating that particular family member or friend that have passed. And then the big celebration is Day of the Dead, or Dia de los Muertos. And that is the one where the whole public spectacle basically blossoms. And this is not, like I said, this is not just in Mexico, but it's also celebrated throughout the entire Central American continent as well, in some cultures as well. In South America, there are also Latin American cultures. There are very distinct features in this whole celebration. Like I said, there's this altar or ofrenda where the whole point of it is not just to remember that person, but the ofrenda, it is thought to be that place that is calling for all those dead family members or friends, because it's so beautiful. There are pictures of them, so it's almost like invoking the presence of those family friends and loved ones. Also, there is a particular flower, which is the flower of the dead called the marigold, that is actually used in this celebration. And it basically speaks to the fragility of life. How this is something that is part of living. Just like being alive, dying is also part of that. And that is also creating a tremendous connection with the Mesoamerican cultures, the Aztecs, where they saw that part of life as something that was just integral to just as being alive. And this is something that permeates throughout the entire celebration. So this year, when you're thinking, if you're living here in the United States, about Halloween, just also think that other cultures and other traditions are being put into play, particularly as we go into November 1st and November 2nd to celebrate Día de los Inocentes, Día de los Difuntos, and finally Día de los Muertos, or Day of the Dead. Traditional in these cultures because it's part of it, but also you'll see that costumes like the one I'm wearing are actually part of that too. Why? Because it's invoking that connection between those who are living and those who are dead. And with those words, I'm actually going to be putting back my kind of animal skeleton here, my skull, and I'm going to be saying to you, as I always like to say, from my heart to your heart, this is Dr. Mario saying, a tu salud, que vivan los muertos. See you next time.